All right, good morning for those who are joining, who have joined. We will get started in just another minute or so. So, welcome. All right. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Would like to wish everyone a happy new year, and I hope that the year is getting off to a good start so far. From the perspective of our webinars, I feel like this is a good start because we have a good webinar for you all today, and we're very happy to have Dr. Logan Blizzard here to give us some pretty valuable information around transportation of lithium batteries. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping things. Firstly, I'm Julie Mitchell with the House Waste Management Program in King County and NAMA Board of Director member, and I will be moderating the webinar today. So we have disabled the chat function. So if you have questions, as Dr. Blizzard is doing the presentation, please use the Q&A function for your question. And Dr. Blizzard, he will be doing his presentation, and then we will save questions for the end. And I will be moderating that, Dr. Blizzard. So I'll be asking the questions that show up in the Q&A. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Blizzard, and he's got a lot of good stuff for us. So thank you.
Hello, and thank you, Julie. Thank you, Nama, for having me today. My name is Logan Blizzard. I'm a transportation specialist with the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration's Office of Hazmat Safety, and I'm here in an outreach capacity to discuss the US DOT regulations for shipping lithium batteries. And just a quick disclaimer before we get started, this presentation is not an endorsement of any outside organization, but only meant to provide information on the hazardous materials regulations. So for today, I'm going to start off with a few examples of lithium battery incidents to give a sense of the risks involved in lithium battery transportation. Next, I'll provide a general overview of the DOT regulatory scheme with a bit of a focus on the requirements for shipping small batteries, since we found these to be the most common by volume. Then I'll explain the provisions for end-of-life and damaged batteries and wrap up with a number of resources PHMSA has developed to assist you in compliance. Let's start with why we should be concerned about lithium batteries. First off, lithium batteries have very high energy density, meaning that they contain more energy than other batteries of similar size. In the past decade, this energy density has only increased. At the same time, these batteries contain a flammable electrolyte. So when damaged, lithium batteries present a significant risk of a serious incident. Thermal runaway can occur, and the release of all that stored energy can result in fire, explosion, and the release of flammable gases. Further, we continue to see incidents involving lithium batteries intended for recycling or disposal, with the US EPA reporting 245 fires at waste facilities caused by lithium batteries between 2013 and 2020. That number is likely higher over the last few years. And with the increase in battery production and the proliferation of battery-powered devices, we're also seeing an increased quantity of end-of-life or second-life batteries. To put this in perspective, I'd like to discuss a few incidents involving undeclared, misdeclared, and end-of-life lithium batteries. Please note that these events are public knowledge, and I'm not going to be divulging any proprietary or private information. So we'll start in August of 2021 with a highway shipment that caught fire en route to the port of Virginia. And here you can see the contents of the truck. Although described as computer parts on the bill of lading, the contents were actually lithium-ion batteries, mostly those removed from laptops. None of these batteries were properly packaged. In these images, you can see there are no internal packagings or terminal protection, just loose batteries in fiberboard boxes. One of these batteries likely went into thermal runaway. That's the self-sustained, rapidly evolving fire for which lithium batteries are notorious. The fire was so hot, it actually burned through the floor of the container, as you can see from the cleanup on the left side. A similar incident occurred at the port of LA Long Beach in March of 2022. Here, the contents of a shipping container caught fire while waiting to be loaded onto a cargo ship. The contents of the container and several others from the same shipper were inaccurately described as synthetic resins not otherwise specified, but they were really lithium batteries. To manage this fire, responders had to move the container. They were trying to get it away from other containers to prevent proliferation. And so they ultimately lifted it up and dumped out the contents, as you can see here, so it could burn in a more contained manner, and they could apply water to cool the batteries around the ones that were currently burning. As you can see from one of the related containers, the contents were mostly improperly packed lithium-ion batteries. These were, again, mostly laptop or power tool batteries, loosely placed in fiberboard boxes or drums. In the bottom corner, you can also see the thermal imaging of one of the Gaylord boxes, where another battery was showing elevated temperatures at the time of the response, which can itself be indicative of a damaged battery. And finally, we have an incident outside of Birmingham, Alabama in March of 2023. This was a ground shipment of batteries being shipped from one recycling facility to another when one of the drums experienced a thermal event. While it's a little hard to tell from the pictures, this was actually a fully enclosed truck, not a flatbed, but the explosive pressure blew off the exterior of the trailer, and you can see pieces of it here in these photos. Fortunately, no one was injured in this incident, but the important note here is that unlike the other incidents, these batteries were not undeclared. You can see the Class 9 battery label on the drums. It really just was a case of one of the batteries going into runaway, spreading, and leading to a large event like we've seen. So why did these incidents occur? Obviously, each case may differ, but there are factors which can increase the likelihood of an incident. Damaged or defective batteries are more likely to experience an incident. Poor handling throughout the battery life cycle or incorrect packaging can cause batteries to become damaged, increasing the risk. Other times, shippers are unaware of the requirements for safe shipping or unable to diagnose if a battery is damaged. US DOT regulations are in place to help mitigate the risks of these kinds of incidents, and our goal is to make transportation as safe as possible. Today, I'll be giving you an overview of the DOT regulations for shipping lithium batteries. I want to preface this with a few notes. First, this presentation is not a substitute for the regulations. I'm here to help you get started, to hopefully clarify the regs, and to connect you to resources, but you always want to make sure to verify compliance with the HMR text itself. Second, I'll be focusing mostly on the general regulatory scheme, small and standalone batteries, and end-of-life requirements, primarily by ground. If you're intending to ship by air, you'll certainly be subject to additional restrictions and requirements, as the safety risks are especially acute in that particular mode. That is, if you have a thermal incident on a flight, it could have serious consequences for that flight and everyone involved. So to reiterate, I'm here from the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, or PHMSA, an operating administration of the Federal Department of Transportation. PHMSA sets, maintains, and enforces the Hazardous Materials Regulations, or HMR, which is what I'll be using throughout this presentation, which are found in 49 Code of Federal Regulations, parts 171 through 180. These regulations govern the transportation of hazardous materials, including lithium batteries, across all modes of transportation in commerce. In other words, the HMR has pretty wide applicability. Part 171, paragraph 1, articulates a few cases where the HMR do not apply, but the most notable for our purposes are if you're a private individual transporting hazmat for personal use in your private motor vehicle, or if you're a government employee that is not a contractor or a contracted service provider transporting hazmat for government purposes only. So otherwise, if you're not fitting into these narrow carve-outs, if you're shipping hazardous materials in commerce in any way, the HMR will apply to you. So because lithium batteries are hazardous materials, PHMSA regulates the entire transportation process. This includes the identification and classification of the materials, preparing and packaging those materials for transport, all hazard communication, that's marks, labels, placards, and supporting documents, and subsequent movement. And this isn't just limited to new batteries. E-scrap, battery collection, e-waste recycling, and refurbishing operations all involve transportation functions under the HMR. Requirements for shipping hazardous materials are dictated by the material you're shipping. So no matter what the material is, you always need to properly classify and identify it and determine all of the applicable requirements, including training, packaging, marking, labeling, and more. For lithium batteries, many of the relevant provisions are found in 49 CFR Part 173.185 as listed here, and you can see the subparagraphs listed out. I'll be touching on most of these paragraphs today, and I've included citations in most of the slides if you need to refer back to the text yourself. So again, HMR requirements are based on the proper classification of materials. For lithium batteries, this is determined by three components: battery type, configuration, and size. For battery type, lithium batteries fall into one of two basic categories: lithium metal or lithium ion. Lithium metal batteries contain a small amount of metallic lithium or a lithium alloy and are typically non-rechargeable. The size of these batteries is measured in grams of lithium content. The most common configurations of lithium metal batteries are coin cells, like those in watches or digital thermometers, but we also see cylindrical and rectangular batteries like those shown here. These are often the batteries that most trip up consumers trying to dispose of them, since they're easy to confuse with alkaline or other battery types. On the other hand, lithium-ion batteries tend to be rechargeable or secondary batteries. These contain a lithium compound, such as lithium cobalt dioxide or lithium iron phosphate. That said, DOT doesn't differentiate between cathode chemistries. If it uses a lithium-ion chemistry, including lithium polymer, it's likely to be considered a lithium-ion battery. And then for these batteries, the size is measured in watt hours, not in grams of content. So here are a few examples of the typical configurations of lithium-ion batteries. They can be cylindrical, rectangular, or pouch packs, and are often found in laptops, tablets, cell phones, and power tools. But as rechargeable batteries continue to be utilized in an ever-growing range of devices, it's hard to distill these down to just one or two form factors. Our next piece in classification is the configuration. A United Nations identification number, or UNID, is used to clearly identify the material in transportation. In the DOT classification scheme, there are different names and ID numbers based on whether the batteries are shipped standalone or packed with or contained in equipment. For lithium-ion batteries, you would use UN 3480 for standalone batteries or UN 3481 if the batteries are contained in equipment or packed alongside the device they're intended to power. For lithium metal batteries, we have the same distinction between UN 3090 for standalone batteries and 3091 for batteries contained in or packed with equipment. I'll also mention a few other UNID numbers that can apply to lithium batteries. And while I doubt large battery energy storage systems would be something this audience would see, you may encounter battery-powered vehicles like e-bikes or e-scooters, which have a separate ID number you can see listed here. But if the scooter or e-bike battery is no longer in the vehicle, you would be treating that as a standalone battery. Finally, the size of lithium batteries is crucial. Batteries that fit under the small battery thresholds listed here are accepted from a number of regulatory requirements. Generally speaking, a smaller battery will not exceed the sizes listed in this table: 100 watt-hours for lithium ion or 2 grams for lithium metal. For ground transportation only, some slightly larger batteries can be considered small batteries. That's up to 300 watt-hours or 25 grams lithium content. Many consumer electronics you'll come across will fall under the small battery threshold. For example, a typical laptop battery might be around 60 watt-hours, while a cell phone battery generally won't exceed 12 watt-hours. Some electronics manufacturers may even specifically note that none of their products exceed 100 watt-hours, which is meant to communicate that their batteries meet this definition. The good news is that the watt-hour rating is now required to be marked on all lithium-ion batteries, so this should be pretty easy for you to determine. And then larger batteries, like those that power e-bikes and scooters, will most likely exceed 100 watt-hours, but they may fall under that 300 watt-hour rating. These are sometimes called a medium or a mid-sized battery, but that's not a term within the HMR. So for our purposes, just know that these batteries may still qualify for the small battery exception by ground, but it's fully regulated when transported by other modes, especially if you're shipping by air. Again, the reason size is crucial is because it determines whether you fit the thresholds for the small battery exception. And if so, your shipment may be accepted from many of the requirements for fully regulated hazmat, including hazard communication, training, emergency contact information, and UN specification packaging requirements. For small batteries, the packaging requirements are largely performance-based. This means the regulations do not specify or prescribe a particular packaging configuration that must be used for smaller consumer batteries, only that it must meet certain minimum general requirements. These general requirements include protecting from short circuits, shifting, release, or any other damage in transit. There are also some basic configuration requirements. Broadly, packages should consist of 3 things: your inner packaging, cushioning material, and a strong, rigid outer packaging. I'll go into the basic requirements behind each packaging component and give some examples that we've seen being used in the industry. For inner packagings, there are some basic requirements as listed here. Again, these are performance requirements. The inner packaging is the primary means of preventing short circuits and mitigating the risk of spark and potential thermal runaway. As such, we require these to be non-metallic, to completely enclose the battery and terminals, and to protect from conductive material. Common methods include taping the batteries or using individual plastic bags. And if the batteries are installed in equipment, the equipment itself can be sufficient inner packaging. So here are some examples of inner packagings that provide terminal protection. You can see taping or bagging individually there in the center and on the left. And in the bottom corner is the ravioli method. as we call it, where you take button cells and space them out on packaging tape or some other adhesive that covers the battery, and then place another layer on top. In the bottom right corner, you see cardboard partitions separating the batteries that are themselves within individual bags. All of these are acceptable as long as the inner packaging completely surrounds the cells and batteries and the terminals are protected. The regulations also call for cushioning to prevent movement that could damage batteries under expected transport conditions, such as shifting, vibrations, and small drops, as well as cell-to-cell contact. Accordingly, the cushioning materials must be electrically non-conductive and non-reactive. So some examples currently sold by commercial packaging suppliers include bubble wrap, diatomaceous earth, and vermiculite. Third, the outer package needs to be a rigid, strong outer packaging. It must be sturdy, durable, and constructed to retain the contents. It also must be able to meet these performance requirements from a 1.2 meter or about 4-foot drop. The term rigid packaging is very important here. Flexible or padded shipping envelopes may seem like an affordable, easy way to ship small items like a battery. But while these may meet the drop test requirements, they're not sufficiently protective from impact and handling in sorting systems. Both DOT and USPS have seen incidents resulting from this practice, which is why the regulations specifically require rigid outer packagings. This is the lithium battery handling mark that must be placed on packages of small batteries. So a few details about the marking. There are size requirements for the marking as shown here, though the dimensions can be reduced to 105 by 74 millimeters if the package is too small for the normal mark. The hatching on the marking must be red, and then the stars under the image of the battery are placeholders for information. The first is replaced with the UN number appropriate for the batteries contained, so UN 3480, 3481, 3090. And if you're shipping multiple types in the same package, you can include more than one ID number on the marking, or use multiple markings with different ID numbers. Commercial suppliers sell these pre-printed or blank, and you can handwrite the information provided it's durable and legible. And finally, the double star at the bottom center of the marking is supposed to be replaced with a telephone number to provide information on the shipment. But as of last year, this is no longer required. You can continue to include the phone number through the end of 2026 if you would like, or if you have pre-generated labels or pre-generated markings, but this will no longer be the case after 2026. So that covers batteries shipped under the small battery exception. If you're shipping batteries above that threshold, these are considered fully regulated and so have increased requirements. Again, we have the same general orientation of an inner packaging, cushioning material, and an outer packaging. But for fully regulated lithium batteries, you will now need the outer packaging to be UN specification packaging. On this slide, you can see a circle with the letters UN followed by a bunch of letters and numbers, which indicates that it is UN specification packaging. UN spec packaging is rated and tested to contain hazardous materials while standing up to stresses encountered during transportation, such as stacking, leaks, drops, pressure changes. UN spec combination packaging is required when transporting larger lithium batteries or quantities over 66 pounds. This UN spec packaging must be rated to a packing group 2 or PG2 performance level. And as always with spec packaging, packaging instructions will be provided by the packaging manufacturer, and you must follow these exactly. This includes using all the specified packaging components. So we'll be discussing another exception for recycling or disposal by motor vehicle, even for larger batteries, in just a moment, which does concern spec packaging, so keep a pin in that for now. But generally, this is required for fully regulated batteries. So if you're shipping larger quantities of batteries or larger batteries, you'll also be subject to increased hazard communication regulations, as these are considered fully regulated Class 9 hazardous materials. One of these requirements is for shipping papers. These shipments will require a full hazmat shipping paper, including a description of the materials, a shipper's certification, emergency response information, and a 24/7 emergency response telephone number. The package will also require full DOT hazard markings and labels, including the Class 9 battery label, which you can see here, and which is distinct from the battery mark previously shown, as well as consignor or consignee name, UNID number and proper shipping name, and the UN spec packaging code. So all of these requirements are spelled out in separate subparts of the HMR, and I'm happy to pass along additional resources on these topics. These are common questions that we get from hazmat shippers all the time. And finally, all employees involved in a fully regulated lithium battery shipment are required to have formal training. So DOT hazmat training consists of 4 required parts. We have general awareness and familiarization training, function-specific training, which is usually accomplished on the job, safety training, and security awareness training. While DOT doesn't offer this training directly, I'll also be providing some resources on training at the end of the presentation to help clarify these requirements. So I'm not sure if this applies to anyone in attendance today, but we've received some questions about resale of used batteries. For lithium batteries for resale or reuse, these are treated just like new batteries, as long as they're undamaged. They're still eligible for the small battery exception. However, there's a chance that these would change status based on the configuration, like a battery originally packed with or contained in equipment now being standalone, or if the battery's been damaged or recalled. Again, compliance depends on proper classification of your material. So knowing NAMA's membership, you're most likely interested in end-of-life batteries. And again, unless they're damaged, you're still able to ship used batteries as you would ship new batteries. That said, the HMR also includes an exception for lithium batteries shipped for disposal or recycling to make this kind of shipping easier. To take advantage of this exception, your shipment does have to go via highway, so no shipments by air, especially nothing overnight, and nothing by any other mode. So per this exception, undamaged lithium batteries shipped for recycling or disposal are accepted from UN 38.3 testing requirements, as it would likely be difficult for recyclers to track down the original manufacturers just to find the test report. Further, UN spec packaging is not required as long as you use a strong outer packaging. And you're able to combine this exception with the small battery exceptions we've covered previously, as long as you meet all of those thresholds and requirements. So you have a few options for alleviating some of the regulatory burden on end-of-life batteries, provided they're by ground, undamaged, and/or small batteries. On the flip side, our biggest concern from a safety perspective is with DDR batteries, meaning damaged or defective batteries, or those recalled by the manufacturer for safety reasons. These batteries pose a much greater risk in transportation of going into thermal runaway, off-gassing, catching fire, or all of the above. So no matter the size or configuration, DDR batteries are fully regulated hazardous materials and ineligible for the exceptions we've described. Unfortunately, damaged or defective batteries can be difficult to diagnose. Although not all DDR batteries appear damaged in a physical sense, physical signs to look for include off-gassing or electrolyte leaking, smell or corrosion, swelling, or discoloration. Outside of physical signs, you may also want to consider whether the batteries have been abused, overcharged, exposed to extreme temperatures, or been near another battery undergoing a thermal event. As a rule, if you think a battery might be damaged, it's best to err on the side of caution and treat it as potentially damaged. The packaging requirements for DDR batteries are similar to that of other fully regulated lithium batteries: an inner packaging, cushioning material, and an outer packaging. But in this case, the cushioning material must be non-combustible, electrically non-conductive, and absorbent. The outer packaging must be UN specification packaging rated to the highest standard. So now it's packing group 1. As with any spec packaging, you need to follow all of the packaging manufacturer's closure instructions exactly as this meets the tested configuration. Last, and maybe the key difference, you're limited to 1 battery per package for a DDR shipment. That means you can't bag a number of damaged batteries separately and then place them in the same outer packaging. For hazard communication, DDR packages have the same requirements as other fully regulated lithium battery shipments: shipping papers, emergency response information, the Class 9 lithium battery label, the UNID number and proper shipping name, consignor consignee information, etc. The one addition is a specific marking identifying the contents as a damaged or defective lithium ion or lithium metal battery, whichever is accurate. And this text phrase must be marked in text at least half an inch high. So yes, the requirements for shipping DDR batteries may seem rather strict, and that's intentional. I'll stress again, damaged batteries present a very high safety risk in transportation, so we need heightened mitigation strategies. Noting this, many of our stakeholders who ship DDR batteries do so via DOT special permit packaging. So special permits simply authorize an action that is not otherwise authorized in the regulations as written. When special permits are issued, they're closely evaluated to ensure that measures are taken to achieve an equivalent level of safety to what's in the regs. This way, they kind of act as extensions of the regulations. DOT special permits are very common in the industry, as you'll see. But again, if you're using them, you have to follow the terms of the special permit exactly. So we have 3 main types of special permits. The manufacturer, mark, and sell permit authorizes manufacturers to manufacture and sell packagings that can be used by any individual. The use of that packaging grants certain exceptions as specified in the special permit, and that can include, but is not limited to, allowing for a mixture of certain batteries not normally authorized, providing alternative inner packaging requirements, and exceptions to certain hazard communication regulations. We also have offer special permits. These are issued directly to a specific grantee to operate in a manner not otherwise authorized. And this can include alternative packaging or hazard communication requirements. But the key difference here is that these permits are issued only to one grantee directly. And then we also have emergency permits, but that likely is not as applicable to this audience. For many shippers of end-of-life batteries, the solution for shipping DDR batteries is to purchase so-called DDR kits, which are actually produced under the MMS permits I've described. So here are a few examples of packagings produced under MMS DOT special permits. We have the big green box on one side and a call to recycle package on the other. Obviously, we do not endorse any particular product or company, but I have included the SP numbers here for your reference, and all special permits are publicly available through our website. Here are a few more examples of commercially available DDR kits that are produced through special permits. And these can be a useful tool for transportation of damaged batteries for recycling or disposal, especially when you're faced with a high number of damaged batteries. Some kits may allow more than a single battery to be placed in one package, while others allow mixed chemistries of DDR batteries to be transported together. Again, this is allowed because these packagings have been determined to meet an equivalent level of safety to what's in the HMR. And with that large number of MMS permits that exist for these DDR kits, you can kind of consider what's most viable for your packaging needs based on the types of batteries you have, the quantities, and also the cost of these packagings. The biggest thing for you to remember when using an MMS DDR kit is while anyone can purchase and use these packages, you are required to follow the terms of the special permit, which the manufacturer generally communicates through instructions or training. So here's an example of a DDR kit, namely a DOT special permit packaging designed to ship up to 4 pounds of damaged batteries, along with its specific packaging instructions. These instructions align with the terms of the DOT special permit, and so a purchaser of this packaging must adhere to these manufacturer instructions exactly as they're written when using the special permit. So a few points to note. One, if you don't follow the directions exactly, you violate the terms of the special permit. And two, these instructions can't be applied when using other packaging. They're only applicable to the packaging specifically manufactured and tested for this material. So say you get this, this pail and it includes the cushioning material here. You can't buy other pails and use these instructions. You actually have to purchase them through the manufacturer and then use their packaging instructions. It's also important to note that the terms of the DOT special permit may include additional training requirements for shippers using these packagings. So you may need to train hazmat employees on the use of that permit, and that training, like all other DOT training, would have to be documented. So before we move into questions, I want to direct you to a few PHMSA resources that we've developed to help you understand and comply with the hazardous materials regulations. The first of these is the Lithium Battery Guide for Shippers. This is our most comprehensive resource on shipping lithium batteries, and it's a great first stop if you have any questions about lithium battery shipping requirements. So this guide includes guides for all configurations and sizes with visual breakdowns of the packaging and hazard communication requirements. And we just updated the guide in November, so it includes the latest 2024 rulemakings. It's fully up to date. So if you get the guide, you can flip to the exact kind of battery type and configuration that you have, and it'll walk you through all of the requirements under the HMR. Second, recognizing the challenges in diagnosing battery health, we've also created a resource focused on just DDR batteries. So this includes a visual guide to signs that lithium batteries are damaged, as well as full descriptions of the shipping requirements for DDR batteries. I touched on these topics, but this guide provides a more comprehensive breakdown and clearly articulates the packaging and hazard communication requirements for DDR shipments. As I mentioned earlier, training is required for what are considered hazmat employees, so those involved in the shipment of fully regulated and DDR batteries. We've developed two resources to help in the training process. One breaks down the requirements, and the other is to help assist you in developing a training program of your own. And if you're dealing with batteries over 300 watt hours especially, these could be very useful to you. Then if you're interested in keeping up with the latest hazmat rulemakings, compliance aid resources, and training opportunities, I'd also recommend that you subscribe to our quarterly newsletter here. It's called Hazardous Matters. I run this personally, and I do try to shout out anything related to lithium batteries, which is a lot of the work that we do. These are a major commodity for us. And so I try to target that audience with this newsletter to make sure that it's as relevant as possible. And I'm going to wrap up with my contact information, as you can see listed here. But if you have any specific questions, I would also encourage you to contact our Hazardous Materials Information Center. So that Hazmat Information Center is a free resource to talk to a live person with your regulatory questions regarding hazardous materials transportation. They're staffed 9 to 5 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday, and they can find you an answer to just about any regs question that you might have. So if you reach out to me and you have a very niche, very specific question about your operation, I should be able to help you, but the info center, this is what they do all day, every day. And so they're a great resource for you if you have any questions about how the regs apply to your operation. So with that, I can wrap up the presentation and pass this back along to Julie for some questions.
All right. Logan, thank you so much for all of that information. I know it was a lot, but the way you kind of broke it down for us, that was great. So far we have one question for you, and it's about providing a link to where there is a listing of the special permits. And I don't know if one of the slides, like a few slides ago, has the listing of the special permits, or if that's something that you can throw in the chat, and then we'll maybe can find a way to get it to folks.
Yes. 1 second, I'm pulling up our special permit find feature right now. Sorry, it'll just be a second. I didn't have it up in my browser. And that's in the Q&A feature, or should I drop it in the chat?
Let's see. Arnie, will he be able to drop it? We disabled chat, so
I'll answer in the Q&A
in the
actually. I
Q&A.
can
Yeah.
answer live,
Okay.
maybe.
And then while you are, or actually, I'll let you go ahead and drop that in there. And we have another question.
I can't drop it in there. So I'll send this to the host and maybe you can figure out how to, to share with the attendees. Um,
Oh,
Otherwise,
no, we got it. We got it in the chat.
okay. And I will mention, I'm working on a compliance aid brochure focused on special permits so that we can make this easier to use for a lot of our stakeholders. So keep an eye out for that as well. It hopefully will be sometime within this fiscal year.
Okay. And let's see. Okay, so we have a few more things coming in. So I'll take them in the order that I got them. So, okay, so regarding the covering of the terminals of the lithium metal and lithium ion batteries, would rubberized aerosol, like the Flex Seal spray, would that be sufficient to cover the terminals?
I Our requirements are only performance based. So I can't give you a firm yes or no. Um, I guess I would worry about chemically if we think that there's some reason that it could be a problem, if it would seep into the battery itself and maybe short something. But again, we only have performance requirements, so it's kind of up to you how you think would be what would be the best method. Um, I don't know if we're talking application, if you're thinking you could spray a number of them at one time. It has to fully enclose the battery, so I would worry about some coverage issues there too. But again, we only have performance requirements.
Okay. So, Eric, I hope that helps. That sounds like a maybe. So, but that it has to adhere to the performance standards. And then with regards to about the links and so forth that were for your resources, there were some QR codes. However, this is going to be recorded. So if you all want to go back to the recording and then just go ahead and skip to the end, where Logan has put those resources in there with the QR codes. That's one way to do it, or Logan had his contact information. So also you can contact him directly for anything that you might have missed as far as the resources. So
Yeah, I'm happy to pass anything along via email too.
good deal. Okay, and then let's see, we have, let's see, some companies promote their products as safer because they use lithium iron phosphate batteries. Are these actually safer from a fire safety perspective?
That is an open question on the research side, and we have seen a lot of effort put into research to determine, what are the relative fire risks or other hazards that we see based on chemistry. And I've never seen any study that says this chemistry has solved all of the problems and it is not a risk like the other chemistries. So I think it would be great if we could show that there was a chemistry that was fixing the problem, but I don't think any research has shown it's just relative to other chemistries. Some might have been shown to have better outcomes, but that would depend on the study. It's again, we only classify things based on is it lithium ion or lithium metal, because all lithium ions, from what we've seen so far, or how it's been determined by international standard setting bodies like the UN, are still having some kind of hazard risk.
Okay. I am not seeing any more questions, but I'll give another second or two in case anybody has anything last minute. We have one that came in. Let's see. Can you clarify the number of DDR batteries per outer packaging are we allowed to ship? That is without the special permit packaging, but meets the performance standards.
Yes, without a special permit, it's one battery per package. That's a reason that people will seek out some of these special permits. I know it when you're buying a PG1 package, it's more expensive than lower rated packagings, and that's because they are tested to such a high standard. So that's another reason folks have considered special permits, that it would allow them to ship a greater volume because we limit it to one battery per package.
Okay, and we have another. And actually, that my ears perked up because I don't think I was aware of that either, that it was one. So, oh, okay. And yep, that answered that question. So, good deal.
And I
All
can
right.
explain just a little further. It's a propagation hazard that because these are so much more likely to go into runaway, we don't want it spreading to other batteries in the same package. Because then you not only have one battery in runaway, now you have multiples, and that just increases the risk exponentially.
Got it. Okay, we have another one that rolled in. Is there any information regarding iridium batteries and shipping these types of batteries?
I've never seen anything related to iridium batteries. Sodium batteries have been kind of a hot topic, sodium ion, in the last few years. And I know there are UNID numbers for sodium ion batteries in the pipe. But I would have to look more into iridium and maybe even talk to our RD&T folks and see how involved they are in those conversations.
Oh, that was yeah, great question. Okay. Let's see. Uh, LFP batteries are generally less likely to explode and burn less vigorously than traditional lithium ion using cobalt. So that was a comment. And is sodium going to be just as reactive? So second one. So is sodium going to be just as reactive as lithium ion?
So that is a little bit of speculation, but I will say we had a report that some of our research money went into, published, that was studying the responses of or the reactions of sodium ion batteries. I can pass that link along actually. One second, and I will drop this here if you would like to do some reading on that research.
And while you are dropping that in the chat, a comment came in around sodium ion batteries. So sodium ion batteries are now in EVs sold in China and is not as reactive as lithium ion and less expensive. So that's a comment.
Yes, and we haven't incorporated the UN numbers for for sodium ion batteries yet. I think that would be in a harmonization rule that would be coming up. So some of these, the ways that these regulations happen is they'll get enacted on the UN level and the through the UN model regulations, and then we harmonize to match or not based on the determination of our agency. So definitely sodium ion is a developing technology, and it's still a bit of a question what that is going to look like on the regulatory side that, if that picks up, I would be happy to come back and also speak more about our sodium ion batteries in the future.
And I think these just speak to the technology and how quickly it's changing, how we have more watt hours that are packed into smaller batteries, whereas before they had to be bigger, and it's hard to keep up with all of the changing technology. So and then we have another question that came in. What are some of the emergency special permits, i.e. batteries that have already been in a fire?
So I think that might be two separate questions here. What do you do with batteries that have been in a fire, and what are emergency special permits? Um, so on the first side, emergency special permits for batteries are often things like, um, when we had, say, the wildfire in Maui, or you have some other disaster, and you've got these batteries that are in a populated area. We're looking at the public interest. So if it's not going to be the equivalent level of safety to the regs, but there's a significant public interest in moving these just to somewhere where they're away from a population center, so that they can be processed, we would, it would be applied for. You'd have to apply to us for that permit, and then we could create that special permit to allow movement with certain standards that we would write into that permit. As far as what you do with it, we have seen a number of cases where batteries will reignite, where they think that the battery has been fully put out, it's transported, and then it reignites on, especially an EV we've seen, it reignites on the truck, and then you have an EV that's on fire driving down the highway. So there is a real risk of reignition, and so I would still recommend treating those as, well, then you would, if we're talking about it in an emergency situation, yes, that would be an emergency special permit case. But I know folks want to say, well, it burned up, so now it's not a battery anymore. It would have to be fully burned down to almost black mass level, I think. So that is a valid question. And I think if that's something you're running into a lot, I would recommend you contact the info center. They can connect you to things like our letters of interpretation that could really break down what you would need to look for and what you have to follow. Because, there is a very high risk of something has caught on fire that it could reignite.
Okay, another great question. So, okay, I think we've got it. We've got all the questions answered. So, thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you again, Logan, for starting us off on our webinar series. So, please, watch your email inboxes for announcements about our upcoming webinars and other events. And yeah, we've got also conferences and so forth coming up, both chapter conferences and the national conference. So please go to our website, nama.org, so that you can be tuned in to all of those. And so I think with that, I would like to wish you all a good rest of the morning, good afternoon, and hopefully we'll see you next time. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Julie, thanks everyone for attending.